Hello and welcome back to Let's Get Woo Woo. We just want to thank
Hello.
we just want to thank you for tuning into today's episode. We have a really powerful topic today, and I think that the way that we're going to speak into it is going to be really helpful towards women, especially in stepping into their power and their spirituality.
Mm,
And what we're going to be speaking into is the feminine and masculine energies and understanding these energies. And I really want us to deep dive into also the wounded aspects of the feminine and masculine energy and understand how we can heal these aspects.
mm,
And I think it's really important that when we say we're speaking about feminine and masculine energies that we have within us, we all have both of these energies within us. So it's not like the feminine is for the woman or the masculine is for the men. We all have these energies within our bodies. And we also have them within our cycles, we have them within nature, we have these energies all around us. They exist within all living things. And they can express themselves in like a really healthy and divine and like empowered way, or they can express themselves in a wounded and like shadow or toxic way. And I know for me, the game changed when I learned that they could show up in a wounded way. And something that Danny and I have been speaking into and have previously spoke about is on a spiritual journey and like on a healing journey, a lot of the times you start to discover that you have been living in a heavily masculine focused energy. So you've been like hustling and doing and going and achieving and attaining and seeking. And it's from a very wounded space. And so a lot of the time when you start this healing journey, you're like, oh, I want to start to integrate my feminine and like embody more of my feminine and come from that space. And this is something I did. And I started to like be more creative and write poems. I started to play more. I started to understand my emotions. I started to rest more. And what I didn't realize is when I was doing these things, it was actually coming from like an undercurrent of very toxic feminine energy. So I would do all these practices and these things that I thought were coming into divine feminine, but subconsciously underneath, I was like comparing myself to other people. I was doubting myself in the practices that I was doing. I was abandoning myself if there were emotions that I didn't want to feel. I was still looking outside of myself for love or guidance or approval. And it was such a big piece for me when I realized that I thought I was being in my divine feminine, but I was in my wounded feminine all along. And this was all I had known. I had never been in my divine feminine. And it wasn't until I learned about what the wounded feminine was and how to heal her that I was able to completely change the way that I do my practices and the ways that I hold myself and the ways that I am in that energy. And I trust that this is something that you can speak into too, Danny, is like, how has your wounded feminine shown up for you? And what does that look like?
Well, it's an interesting question, Mon, because, like I found for me when I started to learn about the feminine and masculine energies, I I learned about it in a very like masculine structured way, right? So this is the masculine energy. It's the container. It's life. It's the doing. It's the being. It's the structure. And then whereas the feminine is the flow, it's the flow of life, right? She's like the ebb and flow. But the way that I learned about it was a very masculine way. So it was like, right, if you do the practices, do some practices and let's start to get into your feminine energy, then you'll start to work with her. And it was beautiful. It was absolutely beautiful. However, like you said, it was in a very wounded way. And it wasn't until I started to work with my wounded feminine and wounded masculine that I started to really realize that these things that I'm practices that I'm doing in my life are only really to tick the box rather than allowing it to come from I wouldn't even say a grounded place. I would say a spiritual place, an ebb and flow, an energetic um, space within itself. But I know for me that the toxic masculine, and it's an interesting piece because when I learned that I'd been living so much of my life in my masculine energy, right? Being a
Mm.
single mom, having to pay the bills, having to do the things, footy training, dancing, doing all the things, working, running a business. It's like quite a masculine structure.
Yeah.
What I'd found is I was like, okay, well, I've got all of this masculine energy that I've been living in. I want to now live in my feminine. I just want to live in my feminine.
Mhm.
Just want to live in the ebb and the flow and be happy and la la la. But then I moved way too far over into the quotation marks. If you're listening to the podcast on audio only, but my feminine, right, where it wasn't my feminine. It wasn't an integrated place. It was a toxic feminine. It was like, right, you've got to do the practice. You've got to sit down. You have to meditate for 10 minutes maximum, minimum, and then you can start to do X, Y, and Z. And then I would notice that I would have all of these judgment pieces that come up for myself. Well, I didn't journal today, or I didn't do this thing today. I'm not in my feminine. I'm just in my masculine, and it's all just wounding. It's like not doing the thing correctly. And a really interesting piece here is when I went to make my medicine drum. I remember I had a lady. I lost my train of thought then. There was like a police car going past. Wasn't a lady, it was my teacher. I had my teacher said to me, she was like, okay, what type of drum do you want to create? How many sides? And they all have like their own shamanic space. They all have like a meaning, right? So you're called or you're drawn to one for a specific reason. And I remember like I was tossing between two. So I sent her an email and I was like, "Oh, I really love this one, but I also love this one. Can you tell me a little bit more about what these mean?" And she emailed me back and she was like, "Oh, Dani, no, this is not how it works. Your feminine will tell you exactly which one it is, and she will come in an ebb and a flow. Listen to your heart, darling. Don't ask about it. Get out of your mind. You're in your masculine energy right now." And I just remember thinking, but no, I'm listening to my heart. I'm in my feminine. And it wasn't until I started working with that wounded feminine that I started to realize that that wasn't true. I was just flowing in and out of wounded masculine, wounded feminine, wounded masculine, wounded feminine. And I could go on a whole tangent as to why I've
Mm.
been flowing in and out of these. And I feel that this will be something that we continue to talk about on future podcasts, but I won't jam it up today. But a lot of that's got to do with upbringing, right? The way that I was brought up, and the way that, like, seeing into sisterhood wounds as well, what the feminine does and what it doesn't do, and seeing the feminine as only female and the masculine as only male as well, which, like you said, is not. Mm.
Mm. That's so interesting because I feel like our journeys are so similar because I too like went the other way and was like deeply coming into my feminine, but it was wounded and I was like rejecting my masculine.
Mm.
And same for me in my upbringing. I had only known a wounded masculine. So I had only ever known like the masculine as the energy that is like the high achiever, the perfectionist, the tying my whole worth, how much I achieve, how much I did, how much money I make, like living a life that was very disconnected from my body. So just like you, Dani, I spent like a couple of years ago, I spent a good 6 months in my wounded feminine being like, I am not hustling. I am not doing, I am not going into that. And I thought the masculine was so bad and wrong because it
Mm.
hadn't been modeled to me in a way that was integrated and supportive and divine, which is what it is, right?
Mhm.
Like there is this energy of the masculine that is available to us women within us that is healing and supportive and holds us and grounds us and stabilizes us. But for many of us, we don't know that aspect of the masculine. And so this is something that I've really had to work with and I'm continuing to work with is developing this energy within myself and calling it back in and becoming familiar with it and healing the wounds that have prevented me from being in it previously. Um, yeah, and I was like you, I would swing from so when I was in my toxic feminine and I was feeling like all of these emotions coming up that were too much and I was judging myself so harshly and I was comparing myself and I was like in this toxic feminine energy, I would swing into my masculine when it became too much and I would go into like full control. So I'd come out of it and I'll be like, okay, I'm going to hustle in my business. I'm going to clean all the house. I'm going to organize my food perfectly. I'm going to train perfectly this week. And I would come into this deep control, this safety, this protection, this masculine shield that I'd been taught because the feminine, what I was feeling there was too much for me and I didn't know how to feel it. I didn't know how to meet the needs that were coming up.
And
And then when I
it's so
yeah.
interesting coming from like a PT background as well, or a bodybuilding background as well, right? Because it's like you got to get the things done, get it all done, but then all of a sudden you understand the feminine and the masculine energies. And you're like, whoa, I need to hold back. But it's really, really challenging to go, actually, I'm just going to listen to my body intuitively. I don't
Yeah.
need to train 3 or 4 days a week, every single week. I don't need to do that.
Yeah.
Because in the mind, we're like, but that's what we've been taught, and that's what we taught our clients. That's an
Mhm.
interesting piece.
Yeah, it is, and it's like a piece of like when you, stop tracking your food. I tracked my food for, like, years, and when you stop tracking your food, it's coming into your feminine and coming into your body and feeling the sensations of your hunger and your fullness,
Mm.
which was so foreign to me. I remember doing it, like, when I first started being like, "I don't know I'm hungry until I'm absolutely ravenous. I don't know I'm full until I'm, like, binge eating bloated full."
And
Becau
it's
Yeah.
so interesting, Mom, because moving into that piece, like I had this discussion with my daughter the other day, because I've been doing a lot of work with my feminine and masculine energies, the integrated versions, right? And I had this conversation with my daughter the other day. She was like, Mom, I haven't been eating enough lately. And I was like, oh, how do you know that you haven't been eating enough lately? And she's like, oh, just because, I haven't been eating 3 meals a day and I haven't been doing X, Y, Z. And I went, okay, but you haven't been like training or doing anything lately either, have you? And she's like, no, because I'm out of routine. And I'm like, hey, just stop there for a second. You're not expending as much energy as you normally would by training consistently. So why is it that you have to eat these specific amount of meals, even though it's nourishing foods, right? Yes, I'm nourishing
Mhm.
my body and I'm caring for my body and I love my body.
Mhm.
But are you really that hungry? Are you really going to force yourself to eat just because a coach told you to do that, or Facebook told you to do that, or TikTok told you to do that? Like, you've got to eat XYZ. And it's like really coming into that divine feminine is really intuitively listening to that body. Like, do I
Mm.
really, doesn't matter if I don't start eating until 12 o'clock today. Technically that's fasting anyway, right? I'm not depriving my body of anything, I'm just listening intuitively.
Yeah, and I feel like that goes for everything, right? Is because the feminine is coming into like deep trust
Mm.
with yourself. And something that comes up a lot is like with any guidance that you receive, none of it is perfect for you until you try it and like your body and your intuition and like your being says like this makes me feel good and this is alignment with like what I desire or how I desire to feel. It's like
Yes.
most of us are seeking guidance from someone else to tell us what to do with our bodies and our lives.
Yeah.
And what we don't realize is that's such a masculine way as well. It's such a powerless way.
Yeah.
But our bodies and coming into our feminine will give us all the answers that we desire. But it's an energy that we have not been brought up in. And like if you think back to your childhood and the things that you were praised for and celebrated for, like I know for myself being in my masculine, my wounded masculine were things that I was celebrated for. It was like achieving and attaining things, doing well at school, doing well in sport. Like I wasn't praised for like playing or I wasn't really praised for like art. I didn't do a lot of art, especially as I got older because you start Oopsies, we cut out a little bit there, but we're back. What I was saying is what you are praised for in your childhood are the things that you continue to do and show up in society, and especially as an adult. So if you were praised for achieving or doing well in sport, doing well in school, I don't know, attaining awards, like all of these things that get you good grades, whatever it is, I received a lot of praise from my parents from those things. So I started to do more and more of those things. Whereas I didn't receive as much praise for feminine things, which were things like crafts or creating or playing outside or yeah, like being in my body and expressing my emotions was huge. I didn't receive praise or safe spaces to do that. And so then we learn that those parts of us that don't receive praise or acknowledgement, that they are bad or wrong, and we start to hide them because we don't receive love for those parts of ourselves. And it creates wounding there. And then we start to show up in the parts of ourselves that we were taught were good and right. So we start to show up in that masculine energy. But what we don't realize is a lot of the time when we are doing the behaviors of the wounded masculine or the feminine that are showing up in our lives, it's because of the wounding from our childhood that we need to go back and look at. And I always feel that personally, whenever there is a wound coming up, whether it's like I'm trying to go and hustle and I'm trying to go and achieve things and I'm trying to seek validation from other people, or I'm looking for love externally, or I'm looking to meet my needs externally. Whenever one of these patterns shows up for me, I know that the root of that pattern is there is a feeling underneath that pattern that I am avoiding. There's a feeling there that I need to sit with and that I need to move through and heal through. And I'm trying to meet that, suppress that feeling by doing something externally. So by keeping busy, by trying to meet my needs through external things like food or Netflix or sex, or if you're dating, going on like a dating app. And so it's so powerful when you start to notice these wounded parts of your feminine and masculine and get to really know them. When they show up in patterns, you pause and you take a moment to sit with yourself and you get your journal out and you write about like what's coming up and what you're feeling, what you notice in your body, what you're needing in that moment. And you start to get to the root of like how you can meet your needs now, because the same needs that did not get met as a child are the same needs that are not getting met as an adult.
Absolutely. But the needs are not getting met by yourself, by
Yeah,
ourselves.
by ourselves.
No one else's job to meet our needs anymore past the age of 7. It's no one's
Hmm.
job to meet your needs. It's your own.
Yeah, and it's such
Mm,
a powerful piece when we can sit with ourselves and understand what's coming up and understand what we need
mm,
and give ourselves that. And
mm.
that the internal love and the safety and the wholeness that it creates within yourself is something that I didn't know I was capable of creating within myself. It's something I had always seeked externally.
Yeah,
Like
same.
always.
Yeah, same. So what does moving through that look like for you, Mon, in a time where you are like sitting down or meditating? What does that look like?
It always looks a little bit different. I find the best way to, if it's a pattern that I'm familiar with, I can move through it faster. But I will always sit with my journal and I will journal about what's coming up, because I find that as I write things down, the depth I'm able to go to is deeper than I can if I'm just sitting and mentally processing it. So I'll journal and ask myself questions like what's coming up. I'll shut my eyes and I'll tune in and be like, what can I notice in my body? What sensations can I notice in my body? What emotion feels present in my body based on the sensations that I'm feeling? Then I'll ask myself, what do I need? What do I need right now? What need am I trying to meet through external stuff right now? Like, what need am I trying to meet through grabbing food or my cell phone or the TV or whatever it is? And then once I figure out what I need, I will either, depending on what it is, I'll give myself that need. A lot of the time, what comes up for me is I need safety.
Me
And I'm
too.
able to cultivate that safety in my body through like breath, through mantras, through movement, through anything I want, grounding. Like I have so many different modalities that I will do. But the biggest piece is sitting down and getting clear on what's coming up and what I need, and then I will move into giving myself what it is that's coming up, what I need.
Yeah, thank you for sharing. I find for me, this is interesting because we haven't spoken about this, but I
Mm.
find for me, I'm the opposite.
Mhm.
So I'm more mentally, like not in my head, but within my body. Like I'll mentally do it and allow it to come through, and I get my pieces through that rather than journaling. So, for
Mhm.
example, for me, that generally is meditation because I very cosmic swimming with my meditations. They're very divine, but it'll be through either a journey or just a simple meditation by sitting and closing my eyes and tuning into my body and feeling into how I'm feeling, what my unmet need is, what's actually going on. The problem's never the problem, what's underneath that. And then all of a sudden, I'll get like this light bulb and I'll be like, ding, there it is. And then I'll write that one thing down or write dot points, or I might write like a sentence or two sentences to journal around that piece. So it's really interesting. I
Mm.
had a really beautiful, a really, really beautiful awareness piece a few days ago. Just to all the listeners, that I jotted down all of these things to Mon about all of the things that I learnt about myself of this one piece that was coming up for me. I had an inner 16-year-old child that was coming through and chucking tantrums. I had a little girl, a really little girl that felt really unsafe and didn't want to live in a state of fight or flight anymore. I had like this mother piece, mother nurturing piece that came through for me, which was just toxic masculine. You have to do this; it's your responsibility, etc., etc., etc. And it was really interesting because that was probably the most that I've ever written about when it comes to my wounding. When it comes to like feminine and masculine wounding, like I journal a lot, but most of my journaling, yeah, is either from gratitude or from journeys and meditations. But yeah, it's interesting. It's interesting how we move through these pieces, and there is no right or wrong way. It's whatever, whatever works really best for you. Coming back
Yeah,
to
and I
that.
always feel like the pieces come up when they're meant to come up.
Yeah,
Like, you will never bring up something that you can't hold,
yeah.
and I feel like that's why the deeper we've gotten into this work, the deeper we go with ourselves and the more that comes up is because 'cause we're able to hold it.
Hmm.
We're able to feel it because I can remember, like, for the first year of, like, my healing journey, little pieces came up that felt big, because I had been suppressing so much. But now those little pieces don't really feel like anything for my system.
Mm.
Well, because I process them, but also because I'm able to move through and hold myself in ways that I wasn't able to back then. Mm.
Yeah, it's such a beautiful piece because I find the same for myself whenever something challenging arises within my life and I'm like, okay, what is this A teaching me? Where are the lessons here? How can I sit with this? What is my purpose in this challenge? What is my doing? My role? How have I contributed to this? And then looking at what the situation is, but then looking underneath the issue. And a clear example of this for any mums that are listening, or anyone that's listening that has a partner, even, when your partner leaves or your child leaves, the towel on the ground that you constantly tell them to put in the wash and they just don't listen. And you get so frustrated about them not picking up the towel and putting the towel in the goddamn wash, or the children putting the towel next to the washing basket, or whatever it may be, right? That's never the problem. That may just seem that's the trigger. That's what's triggering the problem. Problem is deep down underneath that. What is the wounding here, right? And I know when it comes to parenting, a lot of that is that toxic masculinity that comes through. Sometimes it can be toxic feminine as well that comes through. Maybe your mum was always consistent with that, where you felt that you had to do all the things to look after your brothers and your sisters when you're a child. So again, it's that safety piece that's coming
Mhm.
through. Or maybe it's toxic masculine, which I've been working with recently in my family, is a toxic masculine piece that's coming through, which is I have to do all of the things because I am a single mom. So I must do this. And then there's these pieces inside of me that are just like, hello, we need help. Can you just surrender? Drop into your feminine. And then I'm like, I am dropping into my feminine because I'm doing all the feminine things. See? Like, no, 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 no. Come back to heart. What's actually going on here? And then really seeing these energies as like flames dancing in the fire.
Mm.
Right? Came through to a meditation just a couple of days ago. Actually, I sat with my masculine. I said, "Dear masculine, are you there?" And she was like, "Yeah, I'm here." I was like, "Can we speak?" And she's like, "I'm angry with you." And she just had a couple of shakes and a couple of words. She was very angry with me because I pushed her away for so long. Because I had been in my masculine for so many years. I didn't want to continue that hustle and bustle lifestyle anymore. I just wanted to be in my feminine. But it's not healthy because we are both, all male or female, we have both energies within us, and we need to work with these energies. We need to work with both of them. So I had this beautiful conversation with her, and I saw like this gorgeous light, like baby blue, which was my masculine, and this really like baby pink, which was my feminine, and the energies, and they were just like entwirling around each other, and it was just so beautiful. It was like, wow, this is how it's supposed to
Mm.
be. You know, the ebb and
Yeah.
the flow. There is no container and flow. It's like, no, they're both ebb and flow. One is the life, and one is the life force creation. It's like, yeah, seeing them as as an energy and as a spirit rather than just a container and a flow. It's a it's a really beautiful way that's helped me navigate both of those energies.
Yeah, that is beautiful. Like having the balance of both and allowing both to exist in every moment.
Hmm.
And it's like the masculine is the piece that creates a stable container that is present when you're resting and surrendering and doing your practices and like coming into your body. It's like both are always present in everything. When I'm like doing stuff on my laptop and I'm tuning into my body, like I'm in my masculine energy, but I'm noticing sensations in my body at the same time. So I'm in my feminine as well.
Mm.
And that's learning to like create harmony and be in both without rejecting one or the other.
I really love that. I love how you've just shared that because you are in your feminine and masculine in everything that you do. You
Yeah.
never just, I'm sitting in my masculine now because I'm doing. It's like, but no, if you surrender for a moment, then you can do while in your feminine as well. Because the feminine is the
Mhm.
creativity, the masculine is the doing. So I'm going to sit down in the forest. I'm going to sit down in the forest and connect with nature, and I'm going to do my painting. That's masculine and feminine. It's both of those energies flowing through our body. Such an important piece. And something that I really want to lean into and speak into is a really beautiful journey that I actually had um, a little while ago now, and I remember sharing it with you, Mon. And when I shared it, it was such an interesting piece that came through. Now, for anyone that doesn't know, I do a lot of shamanic work. So I work with spirits. I do a lot of journeying with the three worlds, the three spirit worlds, so the upper, the middle, and the lower worlds. And ever since going and having my medicine drum, things have been really, really profound and beautiful. And I've had so many shifts and death and rebirth experiences, and so much channeling and so much intuitive guidance from my shamanic lineage and from my rose lineage and all of the incredible things. So I journey pretty much every day. It's a spiritual practice that I do generally every day that goes for around about 2 hours, give or take, every morning. And yeah, anyway, I went into this really beautiful journey, and I dropped down past the veil, and I ended up coming to a barn, and there was like all of these men and women around in this barn.
Mm.
Now, just a little bit of backstory here as well. I've never really worked with the masculine before. It's always just kind of really been feminine. Like ever since I've been journeying, it's been all feminine. You know, all the archetypes and all the spirits that have come to me, they've all been feminine. They've all been goddesses. They've all been yeah, just all feminine wounding and healing, right? So feminine rising.
Mhm.
So as I came into this barn and I saw that there was men and women all sitting down in circle, I was like, I remember being in my journey. When I'm journeying, I'm like full channel. It's interesting. I've watched videos back and I'm like, whoa. It's like rocking backwards and forth. And it's like full, something you would see on the movies. That's like really incredible. It's cool. It's really cool. But I remember being in this journey and I had like this thought come through that was like, why are these men here? I just continued
Mm.
with my journey, and the journey was basically about feminine rising and the masculine watching the feminine dance sensually, become embodied and integrated with the goddess that came through. And then the feminine was rising as the masculine was sitting around and watching the feminine rise. And it was a really beautiful practice and integrating all of this love. And then, as the feminine, all of the women in the space came back down into the circle. The masculine in the men was celebrating all of the women that were in the space. And we had just been witnessed by the divine masculine in the shape of a man, of men, right? And for any women here that have wounding in terms of, for example, for men, or if they see masculine energies as a man, you would notice that, you may be thinking, whoa, to be witnessed by a man. That sounds normal, right? Well, that's not actually the case because most of us women think that that's normal, but deep down inside, it makes us feel really uncomfortable to be witnessed in the masculine. And something that really came through with that journey and that meditation for me was it wasn't until I shared it with you, sister, and you'd said, like, wow, because I read my journey to you, and you were like, oh my gosh, I think I might have even recorded it and sent it to you at
Mhm.
some point, even. Yeah, and
Yeah.
you've listened to it and you were like, "Oh my gosh," like, when the masculine were witnessing me, I was like it just unlocked something within me that there was so much wounding there that needs to be healed, which was really beautiful to look at. Yeah, and it was just such a really beautiful piece to kind of see that as being witnessed in the feminine or being witnessed as a woman as well by the masculine is such a huge piece. And are you really allowing the masculine to see you fully, or are you gently stepping into your masculine container because there's a distrust or there's a wounding that's happening there?
Yeah. I I remember that journey, and I think for, like, a long time around the masculine, I stepped into my wounded feminine, so I went into, like, a smaller, insecure, like, yeah, just a very low vibrational shrinking of self around the masculine.
Mm,
And because Danny sent me this, you sent me that shamanic journey, and I did it. And in the journey when Danny was guiding it, and she was like, the women all stood up, and you are dancing while being witnessed by the masculine energy, which was shown up as a man. So in this meditation, I was dancing and being witnessed by all these guys. And they were the divine masculine. So their intentions were pure. They were love, they were protection, they were safety. And in my body, as I was like in this meditation and dancing and like not giving a single fuck about how I showed up, I realized that my entire life, I haven't allowed myself to be completely free around the masculine because I've always been scared. I haven't felt safe around them. I'm like, okay, don't look at them. Oh my gosh, don't make too much eye contact. Oh my gosh, like, don't let them look at my body. Like, oh my gosh, give them the evils if they're looking at my body. Like, I never trusted them. And so when we when that journey came through, and then I was like, "Oh my gosh," I was looking at my relationship with my partner, and I was speaking to him about these things, and I came to this realization that I had been fearing the masculine, and I had been blaming the masculine, like the man of today's society, the men, for a lot of my or as women, a lot of our suppression.
yeah, me too.
Yeah, and I realized as I was having conversations with my partner, I was like, he is this divine masculine man that holds this container for me to be absolutely anything and everything I am. And he's here to help me with any journey or mission I have in this lifetime, and he protects me. And it was this piece of how I felt in a meditation. I was able to take that and look at how my man shows up in real life and how I show up in my relationship. And it's really changed things for me. Like in certain aspects where I used to feel vulnerable, and like hold back, I don't so much anymore. And it's like even this piece of I was actually speaking with a friend yesterday and we were talking about something that I've really stepped into is asking for I was telling you this as well, Danny, is asking for pleasure when I want pleasure, but not necessarily wanting to give it back to my partner.
Mm.
And also just asking for sex when I want sex. Because I notice that when I do these things and I come into like that energy of asking for what I want and that power of asking for what I want when it comes to pleasure, I notice in my throat chakra a block and a fear. And the more women I've spoken to about this, the more they're like, me too. And I'm
It's
like, what?
huge.
It's huge. And I'm like, what's there? There's this piece where men ask for pleasure and it's like, sweet ass. And also they can ask for pleasure and they'll come and they don't mind if we don't come.
Mhm,
Right. Well, my partner's not like that, but like previous relationships were like that.
mhm.
And so I've started to, and it's actually been so much fun. I'm not even joking. Like I feel like a little kid when I do it sometimes. And it's like this piece of like, I want pleasure and I will even, yeah.
I could just imagine you going, "Can you lick my pussy?" "Woo, okay, but I'm not giving it you back."
Yeah. But it's like, it is so, it's so beautiful and playful just to come into your needs
Mm,
and express them, like, especially the sexual needs, because a lot of us are either suppressing them or just completely disconnected from them. And to have them met, because I really realized, like, as the divine masculine man that my partner is, he just wants to please me. He just wants me to be happy. And he will, like, if I ask him to do things, he will do them with me and for me. And
divine masculine men will do anything to please their woman. Like, it's what they're made for in relationships, like divine masculine men.
yeah, yeah. And I feel like, and I know actually, it's not that I feel, I know that because I've been with my partner for 7 years now. So he's seen me in my most unconscious to my most conscious state. And a lot of the things that came up in our relationship previously where I felt like he wasn't showing up in the ways I wanted was actually my wounding. It wasn't his. And so as I've been able to work through the wounding that comes up in my really wounded feminine parts, like predominantly my wounded feminine parts, as I've been able to work through that, it's changed the way I show up in our relationship and the way I hold him. And it's such a yeah, it's been so beautiful to work with these pieces within myself, but see the changes in my relationship because of that. Mm.
That's such a beautiful piece. I know for me, when I did that shamanic journey, Sometimes when I do these journeys, they're not even specifically for me. They're for to teaching, or they're for clients, or they just come. They just come from my guides or from someone else's guides, and they become channeled. And this meditation, this journey in particular, was for women, right? And it was
Mhm.
to build in for to build that divine masculine. So I listened back to that journey at a later time, and rather than leading it, I listened to it and allowed myself to be taken away, even though I had my own journey at that time. But it was completely different. Whereas when I led the journey, it was like really beautiful, and it was such an incredible experience. But when I was receiving the journey, I felt very similar to you, Mon, and I felt like a lot of fear come up for
Mm.
me, like a lot of wounding, a lot of fear come up for me, wounding around the masculine man, the divine masculine, which wasn't divine masculinity in my history and life. It was toxic. But a lot of that came up for me, and I was like, wow, really being able to see that. And I started to look at the masculine man very differently, very
Yeah.
differently, like in a state of, wow, what a beautiful man, what a
Mm.
beautiful soul, rather than, oh, why is he looking at me? Oh my gosh, he's standing there with his girlfriend. And it's like, no, 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 no. Who no, we're not going there. That's wounding feminine there,
Mm.
that's happening there. Stay back in your power. Oh wow, what a beautiful man, what a beautiful soul, what a beautiful woman next to him, what a beautiful soul. Right. And really
Mhm.
seeing those things differently. And it's allowed me to start to heal a lot of that. I remember having a conversation with a friend a while ago about retreats. So I run women's retreats. And I remember saying to her that I'm going to be doing men's retreats, like women and men's retreats as well. And I remember one of the comments that she had said was something along the lines of, "Oh yeah, um, I can't even remember what it was, but it insinuated that um, to do, would you be able to hold men retreats? Because I find men to be, quite toxic. Let's just use that as a
Mm.
phrase." And I, sat with that and I went, "Ooh, that's a lot of there's a lot of wounding there." And I didn't specifically perceive that as that. I see, the divine masculine as a space for healing as well. And, the feminine, the masculine, and men and women both coming together and healing together is really, really powerful. Really
Yeah.
powerful.
Yeah, it is. And this is something like we've spoken about is we Danny and I in our journeys have realized that as women we had a very toxic opinion towards men without even knowing it. Like
Hmm.
unconsciously the way we think towards men a lot in today's society
Hmm.
is very damaging.
Hmm.
And something I've had to consciously do as I've changed my perception and my beliefs and the types of people I hang around is being very selective of what I expose myself to because I notice a lot within women the talking down to and the emasculating men. And men are, and just like women are, so beautiful and so pure and so safe and so they are just incredible if we allow ourselves to open up the willingness of that connection and to see them as that. And I know like in every gender and whatever you are, there is always going to be people that cause harm and that are coming from very wounded spaces, but it's starting to expose yourself to the opposite and actually opening yourself up or like having more conversations or listening to more podcasts that talk about men in a very loving and integrated and whole and safe way because they are. They are, and it's time that we stopped talking down to them. It's time that we stopped complaining about them. It's time we stopped judging them and trying to have power over them. And it's time we started to see them in their power. Whenever my man is doubting himself, I always ask, how can I bring out his power right now? He needs me to show him his power because he holds me in mine, and I need to do the same for him. Right? It's time to stop feeling like they need to have it all figured out, that they need to like run the house and do all these things that like we have been conditioned to believe they need to do, and it's time to like see them completely differently.
That's such a beautiful piece and a really beautiful steer into a topic to talk about. I see this a lot. Like I have a lot. I had a lot of wounding with toxic masculinity and toxic men in my life. Right, with I've shared my story with the things that I saw my mum go through, the things that men had put me through as a child, teenager, and all the way through to adult years as well. And something I'm seeing, with I have teenagers now, and something that I'm seeing in this day and age as well is I hear it from my daughter's friends and the girls around, and many teenage girls as well. These boys are doing things that make them feel uncomfortable but these girls are not speaking up about how it makes them feel. So these boys are not knowing, they're not being taught how to treat women. And I know that that might be hard for some to hear, especially if you're a teenage girl right now and you're like, yeah, but the boys, they said this and they're doing this. But, like if you're not, if you're not teaching your children, your girls, how to step into their power and use their voice and tell and speak into what's not okay, then these boys are not going to know. And they're going to grow up to become men who are going to continue doing it to someone until someone stands their ground, And this was a huge piece for me when I decided to come forth after sexual assault many, many, many years later. One of the driving causes for that was I don't want anyone else to go through this again. I want to stop this. I want to put a stop to this. And this is not for everyone. Not everyone's going to want to speak up about it. But you got to ask yourself why. Why? Why do you not want to speak up about it? Right? Because this person, this guy or this girl is going to go and do it again. Right? They're not learning because they're not being taught. So it's a really, really beautiful, beautiful topic to speak into. Um,
Mm.
yeah, and even just leaning into and understanding that we as women, if we're not going to be using our voices, the men are not going to understand. They're not going to know. Just like men not speaking up and using their voices, the women are not going to know, right? You don't know
Yeah.
what you don't know.
Yeah. Yeah, and it's like, even if we didn't get taught it, because I didn't get taught that as a
Mhm.
child, it's like we get to learn that now and do it with the men in our lives now.
Yeah.
Because I will even do it with my dad now.
Hmm.
And it's such a beautiful piece that allows them to show up differently and gives them the opportunity to show up differently rather than just complaining about how they're showing up.
Yeah.
And like an important piece here is like when we're looking at the wounding that is coming up around the masculine and feminine, like there is so much emotional wounding in today's society. And I felt like for so long I struggled with like, because I had depression and I was like struggling with my mental health. And I was like, but like my parents gave me everything I needed. I had a stable home. And something that I've really come to learn is that your family, your parents can most of the time, you're lucky enough that you get all your physical needs met, right? That's quite common is that you get food, shelter, and water. You get your physical needs met. And so we look at a photo and you like, I had such a happy childhood. Look at all the toys. Look at like my family. Look at all the clothes that I had. I dressed so cute and so nice. But what is hugely lacking is emotional,
Mm.
like the emotional side of the connection in families and the emotional teachings and like the need to be seen, the need to be heard, the need to be held, the need to express your emotions, to be taught how to move through your emotions.
Hmm.
And so this is the piece that a lot of us as adults are having to teach ourselves now.
Hmm.
And it's so exciting because I feel like as we have children, like as you have your children, you teach them how to emotionally regulate.
Hmm.
And so then they're able to pass that on and teach their children. And it's just like, because once upon a time we didn't get all our physical needs met. So like every generation we're evolving and I feel that we have this obligation if we do not feel okay within ourselves, we have to take responsibility for our healing and do the inner work so that we do not pass that on.
Yeah, that's so important. It's so important. And if you've already got kids and you're listening to this and you might be bringing up something within you like, wow, I haven't done any inner healing or I've been doing the healing and I've got all this guilt around the way that I've brought my children up. It's never, ever, ever, never too late.
Mhm.
Because when you heal yourself, you heal those around you. You really,
Yeah.
really do. It's a fine example. It's a clear example of that. And you continue to do this now with your children, with your grandchildren, and with the future generation to come because we are evolving and we will continue to evolve every time, every day that it comes along. Because the problem is never the problem, it's always something that's underneath it. Really beautiful, beautiful, beautiful example of this is this morning I took my little man, I homeschool, I took my little man to this homeschooling every fortnight. There's lots of things that they do here, but there's like parents that get together and they do like teaching. And the older kids were learning today about the Nintendo and Sony and Xbox or PlayStation, Xbox, right? learning about that, learning about stocks and stuff, and yeah. Anyway, my son was going to sleep over at a friend's house, and I noticed the energy in the room that something was going on with him at some point, and anyway, moments later, I've gone to the car and I'm like, okay, well, we've got to go get his pillow from the car and do the drop off thing. And then when we got to the car, I've gone to pull his pillow out and he's, gone to snatch the pillow and it's raining. He's like, I don't want to get my pillow wet. And he's thrown it back. And I'm like, we're standing in the middle of the car park. We need to take your pillow back inside so I can drop you off. What's going on? And he's snatched it off me and thrown it in. I'm like, right, that's it. Get in the car. We're going home. So we've got in the car and he's gone to put his seatbelt on crying. And I'm like, take your seatbelt off. Now feel. So he's crying and he's crying. I'm like, feel it. And when you're done, we'll talk about this. And I've just sat there and I'm looking and he's crying, he's crying, he's crying. And then he's stopped and he's, okay, Mum, I'm ready to talk. And I went, okay, what's really going on? And he's like, oh, I didn't want to get my pillow wet. And I'm like, mate, this is not about the pillow getting wet. What's actually going on? What happened? And he's like, oh, I just feel like every time my friend is around the other boys, he just does not there and doesn't talk to me and he doesn't feel it. All of these emotions and feelings coming up for him, right? I was like, there it is. Okay. Okay, darling, let's have a chat about this before we go back in and drop you back off. And I was like, all right. And then we had this discussion, this beautiful discussion about how this little boy wouldn't know that. I was like, are you going to tell him? He's like, no, I'm not going to tell him. And I'm like, but if you don't tell him, he doesn't know, darling. There's a time and a place. Maybe when you go, when you're sleeping over later this afternoon, you can talk to him about it. And I can talk to his mum. What do you think? And he's like, yeah, that would be great. It's like, okay, because you got to use your voice, honey. But this was never about the pillow, son.
Mm,
It was about something deeper than that, right?
yeah.
And it was.
Yeah.
And it's the same with any situation. It's never about
Mhm.
that thing. It's always something else that's going on deep down inside.
Yeah. And it's being able to and how you moved him through that, it's being able to do that with ourselves when the trigger comes up and you're like, well, why did I just get so aggressive at that?
Yeah. And then
It's like,
feel
okay, I
it.
need to
Feel that
stop.
aggression.
Yeah.
Feel it. Feel the
Stop.
aggression.
Feel
Feel
it.
how it go through. And then
Yeah. Mm. And that takes time to do as well. So if you're listening to this and you're like, how do I feel? Just trust that the more you sit with yourself and the more you tune into your body sensations and understand what it is you're feeling, that you'll develop a greater ability to feel and process what is coming up.
yeah.
And it's not something you can be good or bad at. It just is. And every time you sit with yourself, it's learning to have compassion for whatever you're sitting with and not judging it, not judging what's coming up or what isn't coming up. Mm.
Mm.
But I trust that today has provided even just a little insight into the energetics of what might be traveling through your body. And it just provoked something for you to look at and sit with and explore and just be really gentle with yourself. Both me and Danny are still moving through sitting with our wounded masculine and feminine. It's not something that we have all figured out, right? But it's just learning to accept your journey for what it is and not think that anything should be different.
Ride the wave. Ride the wave.
Mm,
It's not about the destination. It's not about becoming fully healed.
mm.
You'll never be fully healed. It's about healing, loving the journey, understanding the ebb and flow, the feminine and the masculine energy of life, right?
Yeah, and knowing that, as you're healing, there's nothing wrong with who you are right now.
Mm-hmm.
Who you are right now is perfect
Mm-hmm.
and whole and complete. Right? It's just edging into that and yeah, exploring what comes up. I always think whatever like provokes and activates something in your body is the next step to take is move into that. So if you heard something today and you're like, oh, yeah, I want to look more into that within myself, then start there and just trust that it will take you where you need to go.
Mm.
Thank you so much for tuning in. If you enjoyed this episode, please drop us a 5-star rating or reach out to us on Instagram and let us know how you found it. We love you so much and we will see you in the next episode.
I love you.